When COVID-19 first hit in 2020, a new kind of darkness loomed as families were suddenly faced with fear and left struggling with the aftermath of a virus no one really understood. For Pierre and Jacoby Swafford, Siskin's light at the end of a long tunnel would make all the difference. Pierre, or Sarge Swafford, is a former soldier and Army medic turned avid horse trainer after retirement. He had a simple cough that quickly escalated and led to more than 4 months in a coma, 5 healthcare facilities, and months of rehabilitation. His fight back to the life he loved wouldn't be easy. But his military training and discipline, along with his family's strong faith, would lead him back.
In this situation with COVID, it's nothing I've ever been through. It's not like having a cold or a flu. It's just something that changes you internally for life. I wanted to do 1,000 push-ups, but my body was saying I don't want to do 10. But my military background is saying, hey, you need to knock the wall down. But I couldn't at this time, not with this illness. This is something that racked my entire body from head to toe, and I'm still trying to get a grasp on it and figure it all out psychologically, mentally, emotionally. It's nothing I've ever been through.
Sarge had always tackled everything with strength, discipline, and force, but when COVID left him fighting to even breathe, his wife Jacoby knew he needed help.
So it was the day before Thanksgiving of 2020 that we took Pierre to the emergency room. Where he was diagnosed with COVID. We were told if he did not get better within a day or two to make sure that we followed up. And so that's exactly what we did. We recognized that Pierre was really sick. We could see it in his eyes. He could barely breathe. You know, we had him sleeping on his stomach. And I remember looking in his eyes telling him that you have to go because we cannot treat you here. And so he was admitted into the hospital the day after Thanksgiving.
What I do remember is being in the emergency room, man. I'm taking mental notes of all the doctor's name tags. I'm looking and listening. I'm watching the bags that they're putting in remdesivir, you know, convalescent plasma. It's not working for me. You know, I'm a medic too. I have a medical background. My wheels are spinning. Hey, Pierre, you might be in a bad situation.
You know, we had Pierre in the hospital. You know, I'm thinking that he's on his way to getting better. So I'm at home like, okay, sigh of relief. But then I tested positive for COVID. And so within a couple of days, I found myself in the hospital. We ended up in the same hospital, only he didn't know I was there. And so I spent 8 days in the hospital. The day after I was released, it was my mother that called me and told me the severity of Pierre's illness and that he had to be airlifted from Chattanooga to Nashville. So it was many, many dark days, many days of not knowing if he was even coming home to us.
The last time Sarge had flown in a helicopter, he was a military medic working to save the lives of injured soldiers. But this time, in the helicopter, he was the one fighting for his own life. At home, Jacoby and their children held tightly to their strong faith, refusing to give up as they believed in a miracle for Sarge. She prayed Psalm 91 over him day after day.
I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him will I trust. Thou shalt not be afraid of the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day.
And what I do remember vividly is Dr. Manda. He asked me, he said, Mr. Swafford, he said, you're 49 years old. He said, if I need to save your life, do you give me permission to put you on a ventilator? You can't phone a friend, can't call mama, can't call your daddy, can't call your wife, can't call your son. I had to dig deep. I didn't want to say yes, but I got grandkids, got a family. I want to continue to live. You know, I'm just 49 years old, I want to die. So the answer was yes. So I gave him permission to put me on a ventilator, you know. And the last thing I remember was the nurses coming in and saying, hey, when I intubate you, I know what this means. So I just closed my eyes and said my prayers. And when I opened my eyes up, it was in the springtime.
Sarge may have been unaware of the passing of time, but his wife and family were aware of every single moment and desperately clinging to hope.
I didn't get to see him for several weeks because as they explained it to me at the hospital in Nashville, that first he had to be cleared from infectious disease and CDC guidelines. Most of the interaction was through FaceTime. So he had some wonderful nurses so that I could see him, the children could see him, but he couldn't communicate back to us.
Before COVID, Sarge and his family were involved in a horse riding and training ranch. He was active, energetic, worked out every day, and weighed 240 pounds. When he awakened from his coma, he was extremely weak, weighing only 170 pounds, had a trach, and was on a feeding tube. Much had changed in the months since he had last closed his eyes, but his beautiful family was the first thing Pierre saw when he opened his eyes again.
I remember my wife and kids surrounding my bed. They know I love horses. They know I have a fond love of Corvettes. I'm the president of my Corvette club, so my kids, in previous years for Christmas, they bought me a red Corvette, a little model car, and a little brown horse that was hovering over my bed. So I remember seeing that, and that brightened my day up. And I remember my nurse playing Chris Stapleton. I'm old country boy, you know. I remember playing Chris Stapleton, and if you saw my video, you saw me playing the air guitar. It was one of my favorite Chris Stapleton songs that I was playing. So that's what I remember vividly as I opened my eyes back up.
In all of the years Jacoby had attended Possibilities luncheons like this one, she never dreamed that one day their family would greatly need the services of Siskin Hospital.
You know, I supported the Possibilities luncheons for several years, and I heard of all of these wonderful recovery stories with Siskin. So it was never a doubt that Siskin was going to be where we were going to have him do his rehab. Siskin's always been our first priority. Yeah. I never imagined this, but you know, I would sit there and you know, I would cry and I would just be amazed at the strength of all of the people that had gone through these heartbreaking life situations. And so to find myself, to find our family on the other end of this, it's just something that I never imagined would happen. But I do appreciate all of the stories that they told, because that was inspiration, and I drew strength from that so that we could continue to go through this journey.
Once Sarge was off his feeding tube and began taking some first tentative steps, he was ready to transition to rehabilitation. Sarge's father had been a patient of Siskin following 2 knee replacements, so he had an idea of what to expect once therapy began.
So I had the expectation that I was going to have to work, so I wanted to do that anyway. But I had a lot of great people working with me down at Siskin. They got me up every single day and worked me, made me walk, made me work every morning. There's no resting at Siskin. I can tell you that. There's no resting, there's no laying down. It seemed like somebody was knocking on my door every 5 minutes. It was physical therapy, occupational therapy. But I can look back, and they made me stronger.
Sarge, while he was my patient here at Siskin, he had a positive attitude each and every day waking up. He was, you know, determined to head back home and keep riding horses, and determined to, you know, be a father and definitely continue those activities.
Siskin Hospital has an after-COVID program to target the specific areas the virus had attacked. And Sarge's compassionate team of therapists, nurses, and physicians rallied around him.
Sarge was really determined to get out of here as quickly as possible. He was always willing to go extra in his therapy sessions. I gave him a lot to do outside of therapy in his room, some home exercise programs, and I could always find him usually before therapy, ready to go in his chair to get down here and do what he needed to do so that he could get out of here quickly. I think that the military background definitely helped him in his therapies. Sometimes we had to, remind him about his energy conservation techniques, to sit down, to slow down, to take a break, that it was okay to take a break, to keep his oxygen up. But he was really determined, and I think that definitely benefited him in his treatment here.
They encouraged him at Siskin to not try to do things full speed ahead, but maybe just sit down at the table, find things that you love to do. So if you like to cook, maybe sit at the table, and stir, and get the assistance, of your family members. So there were always activities that they thought of for him, maybe, squeezing the little squishy balls, stirring, but really for him to do this at his own pace and build over time. And so that's what he's been able to do. And so we really can't thank Siskin enough.
One of the most uplifting things Sarge's outpatient therapist was able to help him do was get back to riding and training horses. This is a lifelong love he shares with his father, former police officer Stan Swafford, who used to patrol the city on horseback.
I had a love of horses from my dad, and I just maintained the love of horses, and I just wanted to pass it on because horses are a majestic animal. They're therapeutic.
One of the lasting effects of COVID-19 left Sarge with very poor grip strength. He desperately needed to regain strength in his hands to be able to hold the reins. That's where Siskin Hospital's certified hand specialist, Cheryl Geist, stepped in.
She asked me to bring in some of the tools, some of the leather straps that I use to rein in the horses. And she kind of thought outside the box, which was clever for her to bring those in.
Sarge was very determined to get back to riding his horses, which really played a key role in his therapy. From day one, he would talk about riding his horses and getting back to training them. And his horses are his happy place. He would go down to his pasture and just sit and lean back against a tree and watch his horses, and that was calming to him. So it was very evident from day one that he needed to get back to his horses or his life would never be the same. Sarge had some really stiff, swollen hands, and I had worked a lot with stiff, swollen hands, but it was just different. And the doctors weren't even sure. They hadn't seen that with COVID. It wasn't common. And so we just kept plugging away at it. Sarge had some really frustrating days where he would come in and say, "Is this ever going to get better?" And I told him, I don't know. We just have to try. So we were pretty thrilled the day that he got a tight enough grip where he was able to bring his reins in, and him and I played tug-of-war with it, and he held his own, and he was able to hold real tight to him, and at that point I think it gave him the confidence to be able to get back to riding again. Cheryl,
my hand therapist, occupational therapist, she's very special to me. She's an awesome person. You guys need to duplicate her and stamp her 1,000 times.
Sarge is forever grateful to Cheryl and everyone at Siskin Hospital for helping him regain the ability to enjoy his passion again, and for helping him actively engage with his precious family. Before his illness, he had just celebrated his 49th birthday with lots of love and laughter, and he and his daughter were planning to cook the family's Thanksgiving meal together when everything changed. He was too sick to cook alongside her. Pierre tried to give instructions from another room.
I was sick in the back room trying to tell her a recipe.
He never got to. He was too sick, and none of us really felt like eating. With our children, even though they're adults, we were trying to give them some sense of Thanksgiving.
Family time and celebrations are precious to the Swaffords, but they missed much of that, which left them more determined than ever to celebrate in a big way once Sarge was able.
So as far back as I can remember, and we've been married over 30 years, he's always had a love for boots. But before he got sick, we'd actually gone to look at a particular pair of boots. And we debated on them because we said, well, they're pretty costly. And so I would talk to him a lot at his bedside. But I also whispered in his ear, get up. When you get up, you're getting those boots. And I would just say that repeatedly.
She didn't know I heard the conversations. You never know what people remember when you're talking to them when they're in a coma.
Sarge remembered Jacoby's promise, and when he was preparing to leave the hospital, he reminded her.
Oh yes, he did. He reminded me that he did. He reminded me that he made it. So I had an obligation to get those boots. The children and I presented him with those boots, and I don't know, that was just, I know he was excited to get them, but we were more excited to give those to him.
No matter how much they cost.
That's right.
Today, Sarge is grateful for the chance to start over again. He's back to working with his horses and enjoying his family. He's looking forward to brighter days ahead.
First of all, I tell people, number one, I have to say that God saved my life. Number one, my faith in God. Number two, the doctor said that if I didn't have the military background, the tenacity to dig in deep, because those procedures that my body went through, you know, I wouldn't have survived them if I didn't have the training and the background that I had. But in my family, motivation to get back home, and the great staff that you guys have at Siskin, the doctors, the healthcare staff that pushed me, the great service that they provided me. Because of Siskin Hospital, I can ride and train my beautiful horses again.